Hello and welcome to IdeaGen's 17 Days of Sustainability. Today we have an exciting power chat led by Luq Niazi, IBM Global Managing Director of Consumer Industries. Luq, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone joining today's session on improving the efficiency, transparency, and sustainability of the global food production system. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Stefan Fürnsinn, who is the Yara Senior Vice President of Crop and Digital Solutions. Stefan, welcome.
Hello and welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. Very much looking forward.
Thanks, Stefan. Well, today, colleagues and friends, what we want to do is really kind of share this important discussion around zero hunger and what it means for the world, but also how companies and innovators like Yara and how technology companies can help drive a change to the global food supply system. What I wanted to do, though, before we get into the dialogue with myself and Stefan, is just set out a few statistics of why this agenda is so important about Sustainable Development Goal number 2. First of all, if we think about it from a food and population perspective, United Nations latest statistics say that by 2050 we're going to have a planet that needs to feed 10 billion people, and right now there's approximately 2 billion people that don't have access to safe, nutritious and sufficient food. And that problem of food insecurity is a problem that continues to rise. Back in 2014, about 22.4% of the world's population was affected by moderate or severe food insecurity. And now that's up to about 25.9%. That's a 15% rise in food insecurity in just 5 years. And there are over 132 million people today that are suffering from undernourishment as a result of the current COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result of this, many children around the world are being affected and are being stunted in their growth and limiting their opportunity and their potential. So how can agriculture make a difference, or what part does agriculture play in this? Well, first of all, agriculture is the system that is there to solve the problem of zero hunger. However, due to the nature of farming techniques, over a third of the Earth's soil is degraded due to intensive agriculture. And that agriculture system represents about 25% of the world's global CO2 emissions and 70% of the freshwater consumption. That's data that's actually from Yara's own reporting. Now, when you dig into that, there is a very big disparity across the agriculture system. Smallholders make up the largest proportion of the world's farmers, but only a small proportion of the land farmed. 70% of the total farms in the world have less than 1 hectare, and that only makes up about 7% of the total agriculture land. And in particular, small-scale food producers represents the majority. It ranges, depending on region, between 40 to 85% of all food producers in the developing regions. And again, according to latest Yara reporting, more than 500 million farmers may not even have enough food to put onto their own table. So it's in this context, and it's clear that we have a massive challenge to address zero hunger. And in particular, I think, addressing small holdings as a major part of that challenge across the world. And we believe that, improving efficiency, transparency, and sustainability in the global food production has a key role to play in solving this challenge. And so I'd like to turn it now to Stefan. And of course, Stefan, Yara as an organization has over 100 years of experience, even more, in agriculture, and a strong mission and experience in helping address this challenge of feeding the world. What does zero hunger mean for Yara, and what does it mean for you personally, Stefan?
Yeah, for Yara, it's the reason for being has always been to fight hunger. Yara was founded in 1905 when there was famine in Europe, and Yara was the inventor of synthetic fertilizer, so that actually plants would get enough to eat so they could grow and then ultimately feed all of us. And that has led to a tremendous gain in productivity, and according to some statistics is the world's invention that actually saved the most lives in the past 100 years. And our mission is to responsibly feed the world and protect the planet. And so it's our reason for being. It's the motivation for why we're there. And we will later talk about it. It's extremely innovative times also right now. We are in a phase of probably equal disruption as it was 100 years ago. And so we see ourselves as sort of the key enabler for zero hunger, but then also for higher quality food production, as we will discuss a bit later on. What does it mean for me? For me personally, is actually the motivation to make a difference every day. When I look at also my team, we work very much on the innovation side in Yara. We work at new revenue models. We look at digital innovation. We look at new channels to the market. So we lead actually the farm innovation agenda in our organization. And most people join because they want to make a difference. They want to actually do something meaningful in the morning. And that is also very much, for me, a reflection that I find it just very inspiring to be part of an organization that has the potential to make a difference. And with our presence in more than 60 countries, serving 160 countries worldwide, I think it's very motivating actually to get up and say, well, with the innovation we bring, we can actually make a difference. And it's not acceptable that hundreds of millions of people go hungry to bed. And that's what drives me. And I think that what drives all of us actually to make a difference.
Yeah, that's great, Stefan. And I know that we're going to go much deeper than individualization. But maybe if I could just ask you just go a little bit more specific on what you mean by kind of digital farming and crop solutions. What does that mean to us, and how can that help the problem of addressing a more sustainable and a more effective food system and less damage to the environment?
I think, Luq, you've opened the topic actually very well. I think zero hunger is one of the key motivations, I think, and we cannot accept that we sort of run into the next 10 years with an equally unfed population. But that's only one part actually of the equation. The equation is getting more and more interesting, you could say, but it's also getting more and more demanding. And just think about all what you expect of the future of food. Think about how you at home sort of make your decisions in terms of what you buy in the supermarket, what you don't buy, what you expect sort of when you think about the food that you put on the table at home. And many people will say, well, definitely there should be enough to eat. It needs to be at reasonable cost. But then we talk about we want to understand where the food is coming from. We want it to be produced in a much more sustainable way. We want to make sure that food has the right nutritional content, that it can be stored, that we don't have to throw away deteriorated food. So in a nutshell, the demands for food of the future are getting higher and higher. And we have to do all this while sustaining productivity, and we need to protect the environment. And so for us, the challenge is actually, how do we get the equation to work? How do we produce more while sort of having these new demands and having a smaller impact for the planet? And one of the answers that I personally believe in very much is that we need to bring it down to the farm, to the individual farmer. I was personally very touched when I joined Yara. If we take the knowledge of a company like Yara and others in agriculture, and we follow a farmer day by day, we can, particularly in these areas that you addressed with smallholder farmers, we can double, we can triple their income. We can make a leapfrog difference actually in terms of the food that they produce. But we have to do this very much customized to that farm. it is very important to understand the weather conditions, the specifics of the soil, the specifics of sort of what is really going on, what is the knowledge of the farmer, which crop exactly are they growing, and so forth. So in other words, it's about personalization. And when we think about personalization, we have to do it at scale because we need to reach 500 million farmers. And when we talk about the digital revolution, digital farming, and sort of the new digital offers, it's about that. It's bringing knowledge and it's bringing sort of customized sort of advice solutions to that farmer so that they work in their very environment and in this very special situation. And that's one of the streams that we are working on. So how can we bring our knowledge very tailored at scale so we can reach sort of millions of farmers? The second dimension is the connectivity to the consumer. The farmer will only succeed if we at the end appreciate what the farmer are doing and if we have the right incentive for the right behavior. And let me illustrate this with one example. If you buy a cup of coffee anywhere in the world, let's do this in dollars, you might pay $2, $3, $4 for a cup of coffee. Now, only a few cents of what you paid sort of in your coffee shop go to the farmer. Now I ask all of you, would you pay another 5 to 10 cents if you knew that this farmer was doing very sustainable practices for your coffee? Would you pay 5 cents or 10 cents more? Many of us would easily pay 5 to 10 cents more. But with that, we can double actually the income of a smallholder farmer in coffee. So what we need is the connectivity from the farm down to the end consumer, the farm to fork connectivity. And that food chain link is another very important example. And we will talk about this a little bit more because technologically that's not so easy. And that's why we happy to work together with IBM. And yeah, speaking of technology, I think that's a key enabler because COVID has also shown us that technology is so important for us to work together, to work with farmers, to work with the food chain. So these are some of the areas of innovation that we believe are necessary to actually make the difference that we want to make. And that concerns carbon as well. If we want to bring carbon down, well, we have to incentivize the farmer for exactly the good practice that they may have done in carbon. And that, again, is something that will ultimately be solved with technology. But Luq, let me turn it around a bit and let's talk a little bit about IBM. I think IBM has a long history, and it has a history that is characterized by really putting smart to work and by putting technology, by sort of enabling sort of the next S-curve in how we think about bringing knowledge to people. And I think very much there is also connectivity to sustainability. And can you explain a bit from an IBM perspective, what does Zero Hunger mean? And I would like to also return the question, what does it mean for you personally?
Yeah, well, thank you, Stefan. So I think, lots of people know about IBM in terms of the fact that we're a big technology company, we're a big services company, but we're also a company with over 100 years of reinvention and application of research and development to whatever the challenges are at each period of time, whether that's making economies and industries more effective, through to putting a man on the moon in the late 60s, all the way through to the transformation that was supporting mass PCs and computers around the world, as well as moving all the way through to what we now have in the current decades, where everything is kind of interconnected and instrumented and being accelerated by all of these digital transformation forces. From a good 15 or so years now, we've had this agenda, which we first talked about as a smarter planet. How can we bring together the capabilities of our technology and our services and our industry skills and our research to help drive what was termed, a smarter planet? And that's evolved into really integrating smart concepts into all parts of industries and how we work. And in terms of what we're doing and trying to help in terms of the Zero Hunger agenda, well, there are many different things that we are bringing together to solve that problem. For example, because we have the weather company, we have data points from around the world in real time about weather conditions, barometric pressure, and with that, we're able to combine that with the kind of data that organizations like Yara have to be able to provide much more precise information and together agronomic insight. And we do that by leveraging large data models that bring together multiple sources of information, not just the weather sources of information, but also satellite imagery, history of data. We have a big research environment. It's called PAIRS, and from that we're able to really help drive optimization, problem solving, such as helping the largest Indonesian palm oil producer drive much more sustainable ways of producing their palm oil over 40,000 hectares of farmland that they actually serve. But it's the opportunity and the acceleration of all of these digital transformation forces. So the ability to bring AI at scale and the opportunity to bring information that gives you traceability and trust across the whole of the food chain that I think is particularly exciting. We are partnering with over 300 companies in the food value chain, whether that's in the production side or whether that's in the manufacturing and CPG side or into the retail side, to really show how you can bring traceability across the entirety of the food system, whether that's fresh veg and vegetables, but it's also applying to, for example, how we sustainably farm salmon and fish. It's how we deal with also the meat value chain. And we initially started to solve that problem by thinking about it in terms of looking at safety, but that engine of traceability has become so much more expansive, and the engine that powers the food trust network that we are part of is really become a provenance engine that allows you to look at not only safety but also waste and CO2 and water, all of these things that we know if we combine it with companies like yours, we can create massive insight into more sustainable production. And to your real point about that change only happens when the behaviors change in those parts of the world that are benefiting from kind of oversupply and overproduction of food, and we get to see those choices and we change our behaviors, then that's when it really comes together. And actually just this year we did launched a very big piece of research that we did looking at behaviors around the world, and we identified now that the purpose-driven consumer, those that care about sustainability and recycling and circular economy type topics, are as prevalent as the convenience and the price-driven consumer. And so I think in the 2020s we're at that tipping point. And then to your last question about what does it mean for me, well, I've always been at the center of trying to help bring innovation to industries through the capabilities of the types of forces and the innovation that I've referred to, but also by kind of convening larger ecosystems to drive that type of change. And I really do think that now here in the 2020s, we have all of the forces available at our hands to make a big change in the food value chain. And that's why I like leading and driving the work that we do with our teams around the world on this. Maybe, Stefan, if I could then just elaborate a little bit further. You touched on being smarter at addressing the planet and being more specific, but you touched on, and I know that Yara does a lot of focus on this, about the challenges of smallholders. And I know that you have solutions that are trying to make the lives of smallholders better. Perhaps you could expand on that. I'm particularly interested in the work that your company is doing in Africa, for example.
Yeah, it's one of those areas of the work that we do that is probably coming the most to the heart, I should say, because it's really an area where, the work directly impacts the families. It allows children to have a future at school. Yeah, and I think it makes a direct impact. So I think smallholding farmers is a very important point. We also focus with our innovation efforts almost balanced sort of professional markets and smallholder markets. So it's been a top priority with dedicated innovation teams, because it doesn't work to just take what you have sort of in North America and then think it will actually work in India or in Africa, as you mentioned. Speaking about Africa, maybe two concrete examples. The first one is when we look at what is really at a pain point for a farmer to make a difference. Then we have to go again very much regionally. And in the Northern Hemisphere, let's say in Europe or in North America, we will probably talk about precision farming, all these sort of advanced technologies. And when we did the research in Africa, it is very clear that most farmers struggle about very basic things, which is what will the weather be like? And the weather is one of the key influencing factors for farming decisions. When to seed, how much to apply, when to apply certain inputs. All of this is very much impacted by the weather. And climate change has made the weather much less predictable for farmers. So their decisions, historically built over many years, do not work so much anymore, but need to be optimized and adjusted. But many of the farmers there do not have access to accurate weather information. Very often they get the weather from the radio about a city that might be 50 kilometers away. And we all know what the weather forecast is worth when it's for a place that is 50 kilometers away. And so actually combined with IBM's weather capabilities, we have developed Farm Weather, which is the most easy to use and most relevant weather solution for smallholder farmers, particularly designed to help them take their decisions, follow through the seasons. And we combine that with agronomic knowledge so that they can really sort of take these decisions and much better navigate the difficulties of climate change, as one example. The other example I would like to bring is around the COVID challenge. And this COVID challenge puts massive constraints actually on farmers, particularly in Africa, and on the whole food chain. And Yara launched together with partners, international partners, NGOs, Action Africa as an initiative, where we provide knowledge and sort of inputs and sort of donations worth $25 million to help feed 1 million people. And one of the fascinating things is that we want to actually work directly with those farmers that get the benefits. We want to help them actually make the best of the inputs and the knowledge they get out of this donation, so that we can really maximize the impact we have on feeding the world. And this involves technology also very much, because how do you trace actually sort of your product, your knowledge down to every farm where this is needed? And we have already more than 500,000 farmers that have signed up for this program, and we are on a good path to make a difference for feeding the world in those very demanding times in COVID. And in both cases, actually, technology is a key enabler. And I think that summarizes very well what you said before. How do we bring technology together with sort of the real application? How do we bring it to life? How do we bring it to the people so that it can make a difference? And these are some of the aspects that are very, very exciting to work on every day.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about that description, Stefan, is that I know that your weather application is being downloaded by a large number of farmers. I think you said it was something like the order of 2.6 million, I think, in the last count. So that's a very broad reach. And often I get asked, well, Luq, you're talking about trying to bring technology to smallholders, and these smallholders are often quite poor and in remote locations, parts of Africa being part of that. Will it work? Well, what it makes me think about is a couple of things, which is firstly, actually, how diverse networks of solutions have evolved and promulgated in these growth economies. And so actually mobile infrastructure is deployed in Africa much more quickly than it has gone in developing environments, because of course they didn't lay down the copper wires that we all did in the past. And certainly I was involved in the previous decade around having teams working with companies like Vodafone and Safaricom, putting in solutions like SMS banking that allowed small amounts of money to be transacted across their SMS telephones at that point in time. And the point being is, if we can get the right information onto the device or the screen in that specific insight at that specific location, then we can make a difference. And I think the powers and forces are kind of there to make that happen. And of course, depending on the nature of the environment, if you've got more connectivity, then of course you can provide more insight and more capability. But if you've got less connectivity, there are alternative bandwidth solutions that can help also get that information across. And I know some companies are working on, for example, using the television spectrum as a way to communicate in remote places. And I think all of these things are important enablers to be able to bring the power of the insight that you refer to kind of to the right location at the right time. But it also highlights another aspect of the challenge I think that we're working on, which is, you know, we've talked about kind of weather data, we've talked about agronomic data, but there are so many other things that kind of go into the farm ecosystem. There is machinery and machinery conditions. There's also in certain environments how you support and invest in the farming. So how do you get farm finance in place? And also how you kind of bring together other aspects such as insurance and other services. So when you put all of that together, it seems that, you know, you need to have more capabilities than one organization can bring. So could you kind of give me some perspectives about what your thoughts are about how the industry needs to collaborate more completely to address some of these challenges, Stefan?
I think it's a very important point. The challenge of zero hunger and the challenge of providing sustainable food and sort of meet all these requirements that we discussed for 500 million farmers and ultimately billions of people, by all respect to any company, I think it's bigger than one single company can deliver. And we have part of our vision is actually a collaborative society. And I think when we talk about zero hunger and when we talk about farming and the fragmentation that comes with sort of 500 million suppliers. I think about how many car producers you have and how many farmers you have. And yet sort of the need for getting very specific. And as you said, Luq, sort of be very well informed about what actually happens on the farm so that we can take the right support for these farmers, but also to give them reward for the good things that they do. Then it becomes clear that we need to find a way to collaborate. And somebody said a couple of months back that data is the oxygen of sort of the technology disruption. And I like this a lot. But data is also not an easy thing when it comes to farming. And many companies have very good data sets. IBM does, Yara does, others do. But we very much see that nobody has a sufficient data set. So it's a bit like puzzle pieces. We all have puzzle pieces, but nobody has enough pieces actually to build the puzzle on their own. And so what we have launched actually together with IBM and some others is a so-called open farm and field data exchange. Open because we invite everybody in the world actually to collaborate around data. Share data with the purpose, so where we all agree how we want to make a difference on the farm. And then we actually bring companies together that all provide their puzzle pieces so that we can then all benefit from that. And we want to do this in a very responsible way. So we obviously have to respect that a lot of this is the farmers' data. And we also have to respect that companies will also see data as an asset. So we want to really collaborate on making a difference with data, all agreeing why we actually want to share data, but then bring data together so that we can all sort of collaborate. And I think the examples are actually very inspiring also personally. Think about if we want to optimize carbon on a farm, we want to say, I want to see on my banana at the end, for example, on the bread that I eat, whether this was actually done in a carbon optimal way and is helping us to fight climate change. Now, this is a topic where nobody has all the data that is needed, but how compelling is it actually if we can bring 20, 30 companies together that bring all their data assets together and then really sort of offer solutions that can make a difference. And you also talked about finance. I think banks have some data, insurance have some data, input companies have some data. Can we not bring this data together and make a difference? And I'm very excited about the opportunity to collaborate. Collaborating on data is a technology challenge, which luckily we have you as a partner to work with us, but it's also a trust challenge. And I think very happy to have now already more than 30 companies that are working with us in different geographies actually on bringing this data together. And yeah, collaboration for me is a very motivating thing because it really unlocks the potential that we have, particularly in providing the food for the future. Maybe, Luq, if we talk so much about technology and the opportunities that technology provides, can you sort of talk a little bit more about sort of in which way you see that actually technology can make a difference, and how also the different environments, the different technology assets, the modern technology innovation actually can be brought together? How do we make this apply in practice?
Yeah, well, I think, Stefan, your point around the fact that data is so diverse across so many different market participants, whether it's the farmers themselves, the agri companies that support them, the machinery companies, government data about the country, university and research data, and then of course you mentioned other value-added data like the farm data, the finance data, the insurance data. This data is truly distributed, and so often people talk about this concepts of data lakes, where you would need literally a kind of a data ocean, and it wouldn't be enough if you try to bring it together in one place. And the reality is that data is federated across multiple organizations and multiple parties. And so the way to bring it together is to do two things in my mind. One is to be able to create the right metadata structure that allows people's specific data on different parts of the farm problem to be recognized in a common data model. And so there is an importance of driving to have that reference data model, but also data standards in the food value chain all the way from sourcing through to consumption. A lot of the data standards that exist are quite there in manufacturing and some of the retails, but as you go earlier in the value chain, actually it gets less structured. And so there's an opportunity to get better data standards and then to provide this metadata model. But ultimately that data will be federated. Some of it's going to be in the cloud, different types of clouds. Some of it's going to be in people's data centers, and it's going to be some of it's going to be on people's PCs. And so the way to bring that together is where technology is heading, which is this concept of the ability to integrate federated data in a multi-cloud environment, a hybrid cloud environment that can bring that reference data model and data structure, but actually where it's residing is in different places. And that's where technologies like the company that we acquired, Red Hat, really come to bear in order to provide that multi-cloud management, that multi-cloud architecture. And then, of course, there's the importance of being clear about what data can be shared in what way, and making sure that appropriate permissions are applied in data in the right way. And so that's where things like blockchain have a big part to play in permissioned and secured environments. So data is shared with those participants that people are comfortable sharing it with, because it is an ecosystem, and some parts of the ecosystem in certain parts will be collaborating, and other times they may be working in competition a little bit. So we have to provide that security of how data can be permissioned and exchanged. And of course, once you've got that, then you bring it together with the compelling applications that are deployed digitally, pulling in real-time sensing information, whether it's weather equipment data, it's the instrumentation of things, IoT, and of course, the real power is when you apply the AI analytics at scale and in a way that allows the AI to learn and self-correct. And we use something called AI OpenScale as part of our Watson portfolio to help address those kind of problems. And there will be, similar solutions from other technology partners. And it's about open collaboration in the way that you described from a kind of a business and an ecosystem perspective. But it's also going to need to be an open collaboration as it relates to the bringing together of the technologies, because not one organization has the ability to solve this. We need that technology collaboration also. And again, we're proud to be working with you and the other partners that you mentioned, but we're also very open to bringing in other technology partners as part of that ecosystem so that we can accelerate the impacts of the collaboration that we're bringing together, and hopefully the change that we can make ultimately for our farmers and ultimately for people at large. So it's really, really that kind of approach that we're thinking about. So, I do feel that when we look at it in its entirety, that, this is the decade that we can really make a substantive move forward in trying to bring this goal of zero hunger to bear. Maybe, Stefan, if you could just spend some time kind of wrapping up your thoughts, your visions for the next 5 or so years and what you're really hoping to achieve this decade.
I think zero hunger I would combine with the need, the imperative for sustainable food production. I think those are very, very much what drives us. I think what we saw also when you talked about the example of smallholders at Africa and the specific needs and so forth, I think it takes dedication. I think it takes to be in for the long term. And I think it takes for a company to find a purpose and a business model that actually very much are linked. Somebody said recently, which really resonated with me, that a winning company is one that finds profitable ways to solve the world's biggest problems. And I think what really I believe we have to do over the next 10 years, also as a company like Yara, is we have to question how will actually sustainable food production and zero hunger work? What are the key differences that we can make? And we need to find profitable ways in the next 10 years to solve this problem. And the answer has to be dedication and innovation. And very much excited to be a part of this. And Luq, over to you for your closing reflections.
Well, I agree with so much of what you've said, Stefan, and I think that alongside that, of course, we do need policymakers and governments as well as non-government organizations to help continue to facilitate that. But I think if we all move forward together in this collaborative way, I'm pretty certain that we're now at a point where the technologies are at a scale that are viable to really make a difference. And so with the right kind of collaboration of those companies that want to do good for the world and be successful in being good for the world, brought together with those companies that want to apply technology for good, combined with the right mindsets, through the United Nations and organizations like the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which we're both members of in terms of our companies. These are the ingredients that I think can make a real change. And I am both determined and hopeful that in this decade we can see a really big step forward towards solving the problem of a much more sustainable food value chain, much more responsibility in the food we consume and where we consume from and when we consume it, and ultimately driving towards the goal of addressing zero hunger, particularly in the poorer parts of the world, and to help the large population of smallholders be successful. So with that, Stefan, I'd like to thank you again for spending the time with us today on this Idea Gen conversation. And I hope that the viewers of this slot have found it interesting and taken some insight. I'll hand it back to the Idea Gen team.
Thank you very much.